again, I'll jump around a little bit. So in respect to the five senses, when we get still, like the distilled water, then we become able to take on these energies and frequencies and vibrations, and you are what you consume, but not only what you eat and what you drink, but what you consume with your five senses. So what we listen to, the music, the frequencies. So when Michael's playing his flute and we're hearing the gong, we're taking this in. And I will even go farther than the five senses of what we smell and what we drink and what we taste, what we feel, but even our thoughts and what we think. That affects this pond, this body of water that we are in this avatar. And so this is paramount when we're going through this journey in this path. So I'm going to go back to the distiller, and so I'm going to say that we have the ability, like the distiller, to distill ourselves and purify ourselves. And so what happens in a distiller is you start with a gallon of water, and you pour it into this distiller on your countertop that you plug in. And this gallon of water has different inorganic minerals, and it's junk that this water picked up along the way. And it's not necessarily bad junk, but some of it could be stuff that we don't want in our system or in that water. And so what the distiller does is it turns that water, it heats it up, just like we can take our bodies and go into a sweat lodge, or we can go into a sauna, and we can purify ourselves like the water in the distiller. It's this contained unit. And not only that, but the hydrologic cycle that we're in this grand container is also an example of that as well. These waters that are going and being distilled, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So let's go back to the distiller. So what's happening is we're heating up that water and it's becoming vapor, which vapor is like steam, and we kind of can think of that like almost the spirit or ether, because now it's rising up and then it's being cooled off and condensing, and it comes out over here and it's purified, and it goes through this process of intense heat where it becomes steam, and now it's over here and it comes out purified. And so we have the ability to do that with our own experience and with our own bodies and our own selves. We can purify ourselves with this process. And I love that analogy that you start with this gallon of water and you end with a gallon of water. It's the same amount. But what's left over in the distiller is all the junk and the inorganic minerals. You'll see it in the distiller when you open it up, and you'll be like, well, wow, that was all in that original gallon, and now you have this pure water that is essentially like, and it's called distilled. And so still water is water that's not active. How do you make still water? You throw a bunch of mud in it and dirt, and that becomes still water. But distilled water is charged, actually, and it's very active. So it's got this energy, if you will. And then we can use that energy, obviously, once we purify ourselves. So I just want us to think about how when we go through life, if we're picking up junk or inorganic minerals or different things, like I was driving here and there was a guy on the road and he almost ran me off the road. He was playing this weird game, and I was just like, wow, how am I letting him affect or effect me and my body of water? And how can I remain serene like this calm pool and not be disturbed? And that's another thing. When we're serene, and we've all heard this analogy where the pool is calm and serene, and the water isn't disturbed, that becomes a mirror, actually. Now there's a reflection, so someone can walk up to that pool and they can look into it, and they see themselves in it. And so you're almost being a positive reflection when you can still yourselves, which is interesting because we're talking about distilled, which is not still, and then we're talking about being serene and still. So it's interesting. And the hydrologic cycle, I'm going to jump to the hydrologic cycle, which is amazing. So we have these drops of water that have their own journeys and their path. And they fall, let's say they're born again, because they originally were in the ocean, or they were on the rock beside a river, or they were on a leaf, on a maple tree, or on a pine tree, on a needle. And the sun came and they became spirit, and they rose up into the atmosphere, and then they condensed, and then they fell again, and they went on this journey. And we can't create water. We have no idea. So that's how magic this water is, where the Creator is creating, let's say, life, and He created all this water, and it's contained in this system, kind of like we are. We're contained in this system. And so, potentially, like the drop of water that falls, it can have an amazing journey, but it doesn't necessarily get to choose the journey it's going to have. It can fall on that pine tree, and let's say then it goes onto the ground, and then it flows into this river, and it becomes part of this river, and it's winding and spiraling and getting structured, and it's picking up all these memories and all these experiences and all this information from the ground and from the tree and all these frequencies and vibrations in nature. And so we have this ability, like that drop of water. But what's so special about us is we can choose that journey and that path. Where that drop, sometimes like it gets trapped in a saguaro, and now it's basically stuck there, and it's going to be that saguaro's water for a long time before eventually it dies, and then gets turned into spirit again and goes back up and falls again and has another journey, and becomes born again. Maybe, potentially, allegedly, we've been having lots of journeys. And so remembering and having these memories that water contains as well is a great analogy. But let's say that drop of water, let's say it gets scooped up, and now someone makes Kool-Aid with it. And so now there's these chemicals, and I drank a bunch of Kool-Aid back in the day, in the 80s, and it's not the worst, but and then it goes into someone's body, and that drop of water now has that experience of being a part of that body, and it's getting distilled through the kidneys, and then it flows out and goes into the sewer system, and then goes to the water treatment plant, gets chlorinated, and gets all this other stuff going on with it, and eventually will be evaporated, and then that cycle can continue. So the whole hydrological cycle, I guess the analogy that I'm trying to make is that we're like a drop of water, but what's so amazing about us in this comparison is that we get to choose our journey. So we can choose what we consume and how we purify our own body of water, where that drop, it has to go through whatever journey and whatever path it's basically, and maybe to some extent, sometimes that's what happens with us as well, actually. Because we're born into a certain situation, and we're dropped onto that pine tree. And so, yes, we do have choices, but maybe we are more like that drop of water that I initially thought of. In the sense that, I find myself here in the desert, and it was the path and the journey that led me here, but I didn't plan this, to be here in this time and place and space right now. So Bruce Lee says, be like water, And what was he saying? And he's saying, I think, to flow and not try to fight essentially the journey that we're on. And so water has all these different amazing things where it can cut through rock, but at the same time it's not going to try to fight anything. It's going to flow around it, and it's going to basically be malleable and go with the flow, and kind of whatever shows up, it's gonna roll and find the path of least resistance. So instead of fighting that guy in traffic and reacting to that, how can I be more like water and be that serene pool and flow and not be reactive is huge. I'm going to get into Ernest Holmes and a few quotes here, so I like to give him credit and tie certain things in. Borrowing knowledge of reality from all sources, taking the best of every study, science of mind brings together the highest enlightenment of the ages. So when I think of that, we're bringing the best of everything, is what he's saying, from reality. And we can control our minds. And so as we control our minds, I've read a lot of Buddhist texts, and this is a constant theme. Control your mind, control your mind. And so the more we can get still and really choose our thoughts and control our mind, the more that we can have the right effect on this body of water and all of our bodies of water. And when we do this, then that frequency and vibration that we put on our bodies of water can then spread. And that's what we're doing here. We're coming here, we're getting still, we're picking up certain frequencies and vibrations with our bodies, and then we're going out and we're affecting others, is hopefully the idea, And more importantly, we're becoming serene, and we're enjoying our cool, calm pool. And then we make choices of how we want to play as water, how we want to play, and the experiences and the consuming, as we mentioned with the five senses, that go on, that then really add to the whole. And that's one of the other things that, I'll get into that analogy. So we're all one. How does that work? Well, it's really easy once you think of water. It's super easy, because we're each like a drop of water. We each uniquely have our own experience, and we get to choose that vibration and frequency. But then eventually we get into a river or a pond or a lake, and there's all these other drops. And that's what's going on. We're basically like, okay, what was your experience, and what was your path, and what did you choose? What adventure did you choose? And so now, once that flows into the ocean, there's your complete connection that we all have. Is I'm just a drop in the ocean, and we all have heard these analogies. And so the water is just huge in respect to making sure you can calm yourself by being very mindful of what you're consuming that affects your frequency and your 70% body of that water, your avatar, and how you then affect the rest of the bigger body of water. And you choose to listen. Like I was here and I had to okay, I gotta play my Kung Fu Panda, and it's this flute music. Like I was playing that after that incident on the road. I was like, okay, or give me some very soothing music. Like the music that I'll listen to will be, you know, the flute or the drums or the different. I like Ajit Kaur, if that's how you pronounce her name. But the music that we listen to and what we watch with our eyes too, what we choose, that's also a form of consumption. So we want to be very mindful, because then those images affect our thoughts, and then those thoughts affect this body of water. The sweat lodge and the sauna, and that is huge because we are distilling ourselves. We go in there and that heat, basically we become almost like vapor, and we, like that steam that's rising in that distiller, and then it becomes and it's purified. We can purify ourselves in a sweat lodge. Were you gonna say something? No. So I just want to hit that home, because there's a sauna at the gym, and I go in there and I'll do my breath work, and it's amazing. You feel like you're floating if you really embody that experience and you really allow your body to be purified in a sense where you get still, you sweat out any toxins or impurities, and you do your breath work and you get very still, and then when you walk out of there you feel like that new drop of water, like you're almost born again. Let me get into this other. The universal mind contains all knowledge. It is the potential ultimate of all things. To it, all things are possible. So that goes back to the controlling our minds and making sure that our thoughts are pure. And that's a tough one. That's a tough one, because we're constantly, dare I say, being attacked by potential influences and potential beings that may have that devil on their shoulder that they're listening to rather than that angel. And so whether it's other beings that are potentially trying to disturb our body of water, or things that they've created because of those influences, that they want us to watch this disturbing images, let's say, in the media or whatever is in the matrix out here in the land that we're playing in. And they're affecting, unfortunately, the body of water as well. So we have to be that counterbalance. We have to be that yin to the yang. And we have to potentially try our best to be more than what's going on out there, which is difficult, obviously. But this is distilled water in here. Fruit is a form of distilled water. And it's been purified. It's like photonic light from the sun. And when this fruit grows, it creates these liquids that essentially, when we consume them, we take on that frequency and we take on that purification. So that's another form. If you can't get to the sauna or the sweat lodge, then eat the distilled waters and drink the distilled waters that you either buy or that you make at home. And that will make your body able to go and collect the different frequencies and vibrations, because now your body's pure, if that makes sense. So we are having that physical experience, but we are spiritual beings. So how do we tap in? How do we do that dance where we can be more aligned while we're having the physical experience? And it's about this purification process where water plays the hugest role, if we can kind of think about it in that way, because we are majority of water, right? Let me see if there's any other amazing points here. Let's see. The hydrological cycle, that all the water is here, and there's no water. You've heard this saying, there's no water being recreated. It's constantly being recycled. And so maybe our spirits are kind of in the same concept, like these drops of water that are basically being recycled. And they're having these different journeys and these different experiences. And the more that we can control our path and choose the higher vibration and frequencies. And that's what we're doing here. We're coming here and we're choosing those very consciously. So we're distilling ourselves to be purified. And then we have our memories and information like water does. It's a CD, that, like I talked about last time, where we impart these memories, but everything's happening in the now. So we can't really try to be like, oh, well, you know, I used to be a part of this waterfall, but then I was Kool-Aid, and then I was in this water treatment plant, and there was all these chemicals, and it's like, that doesn't really help. So water doesn't, it's easy to forget these past experiences, and it's just right there in the now. And that's a huge thing too, is that as we remember our serene, calm bodies of water, that we're present. And just like Yucca says in Kung Fu Panda, it's like, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and now is the present, and it's a gift. So it's something to that accord. So it's a gift right now because it's the present. And let's see, all container, steam, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I'll just leave you with that essentially we have the power through this experience, and I love this right here, these waves and these just amazing fractals, and I was thinking about this last Sunday I was here, and I was like, wow, it looks like kind of like us, and how we're water, and it's a flow, and we can absorb these different distilled amazing energies and frequencies and vibrations that are all around us if we choose. And then we can help affect the bigger body because we're all connected. And I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you.